Hey everyone! Welcome to the 12 Days of Zentangle 2023.
Yeah.
I'm Molly.
Hi Molly, I'm Martha, and this is the 22nd Project Pack. This is crazy. I can't believe it.
I know. It's actually kind of nutty to think about.
Yes.
This is always one of our favorite times of year when we start digging into this 12 consecutive days of tangling along with a theme with special products, special tools, special everything, and such a festive time of year. And it's probably one of our favorite series, and we have such a blast with it every year. This year, Martha...
Yes, we are digging deep, going so
to the nth dimension.
The nth dimension. I love it. And we're talking about spirals, and we're really going for it.
And I think one of the cool things about spirals is that there is this sense of, I think, like paying homage to one of our most, I think, primal tangles, right? Mm-hmm. Like one of the tangles that came along in the beginning and we use so often, and that's printemps. And it's kind of like Bijou's favorite tangle and all of this stuff.
Of course it's Bijou's favorite.
But we talk a lot more about this theme in our introductory video, so we're not going to bore you too much with that. But if you are just starting today, I encourage you to check out our introduction video for Project Pack 22. That gives you all the information about the theme and the materials needed.
If you don't have these, you're welcome to follow along with whatever you can find at home.
We always say that, like, so important. Like, if you're jumping in right here, like, do it. Just jump in. Like, have fun. Enjoy it. And as usual, Martha, before we get started, we like to get all our materials ready and all our things ready and kind of center ourselves a little bit, right?
Right. So let's take a moment and maybe we'll just pause and to be grateful for all these wonderful things we have in front of us and for the time that we are about to spend together.
Yeah, and more so, like, I mean, the time's important, the inspiration's important, like all of that's important, but just the gift we all have to create is something that I'm grateful for, just beyond words, you know. So to have a moment to sort of think about that, our ability to sit here and create anything is just so magical. Take a moment to find your breath. Find a moment to sort of become present and honor whatever time you have today. Like whether it's a little bit of this video or the whole entire thing, I give you permission to enjoy whatever amount that is for you.
All right. Are we ready to go?
I'm pretty ready, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to put this envelope aside. I have all of my tools that were in my little pouch ready at my fingertips because we are going to be using a lot of them today.
I know. It's actually a great palette, and I love playing with it.
Yes. And see, this is the tile that we are going to be using.
A new 5 by 5.
A new 5 by 5. What a great amount of surface this is. We're going to have fun filling this up with all kinds of wonderfulness. And I love this string, Molly. It's so clever how it all fits together and these sweet spirals. So we are going to
get like organic and geometric at the same time. It's like so
very, very cool. We're going to start off with our brown pen. It's an 05, a little bit of a thicker nib. And this is helpful, especially when we're working on a larger surface. Helps draw a little bit larger than maybe you're used to.
Oh, I love an 05.
It's great for inking in as well.
Totally.
Here we have these beautiful spirals, 5 spirals on the 5 by 5 tile. And we are going to just kind of isolate. There's a lot going on here. So I just want you to look at one spiral and see how it gently curves around and ends right here. So we're going to work in this spiral space. And because we're just getting started, this is our first one, I thought we would warm up with a crescent moon variation. And kind of, they're all variations, right? Because you don't do it the same way every single time.
Yeah.
So as we work our way around this spiral, I'm going to start here on the end, kind of where this point is right here. And we're going to draw a tangle called Crescent Moon.
Love the crescent moon.
I know, I love Crescent Moon. And I'd like you to stay with me so that in case I do something unexpected, then you're not caught off guard.
You're always doing unexpected.
So I'm going to draw my first crescent moon shape, and you'll see that I'm not quite on the end there. I kind of want to leave some space for my auras. So I'm going to leave a little space and draw another. And turn my tile. It feels good to turn your tile. I'm working my way around the perimeter, right along that string line.
I love starting with crescent moon because it's a nice way to just get ink down the tile. It always looks good. It feels good. It's familiar.
You might notice as you go around these corners that your crescent moon shapes might start to get a little smaller, sort of adapt to their surroundings.
It's like the spiral's infurling, it's growing. Mm-hmm. It's like old growth at the end.
Did you say old growth?
Yeah, it's old growth, you know. Gets bigger.
Yeah.
Smaller, and maybe they're a little closer together.
Going all the way.
I was saying to Martha, when you're working with spirals, a lot of time what happens in the middle of that spiral becomes like sort of smushed together, and your lines become more of a sort of a gesture than an exact representation.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to skip the part where we fill in those ladybug shapes for now, and I'm just going to focus on my auras. So I'm going to go back where I started and start with aura lines around these shapes. Kind of having the next shape tell me what to do. It's kind of one of the gifts of aura is you don't really have to worry about what that line is going to look like or where it's going to go.
See how she gently turns her tile each time, just making it perfectly accessible to her hand. So like where your hand is barely moves, but just moving that tile.
My hand doesn't actually move at all.
Keeping your arm and shoulder and neck relaxed as possible.
And you guessed it, I'm going to come back and do another aura line. Your auras might start to bump into each other, and that is a good thing.
Sort of what we were talking about before with the smushing.
Yeah, so we're smushing a little bit here.
And it then does really give that appearance of things kind of, you know, actually kind of curling in.
So here we are met with a nice curve outline here. It's starting to take shape. So now I'm going to add another layer of crescent moon shapes. And those are going to nestle right in between the ones that we've already drawn.
I feel like a lot of times we call this a layered crescent moon.
These ones sort of fit right in between, a nice little arced shape, which we will fill in later, not to worry about that.
Nice.
And now we begin our auras again. And even though these are smaller arcs, I'm still keeping that aura space as similar as I can. And another layer of auras. doing my best to imagine how these ones kind of figure themselves out in the middle.
I love that, though, because it really does make that illusion.
All right, we're going to do one more layer here. So you see, it doesn't really matter how many aura lines, making your way around the spiral.
Yeah, you're really playing around with until the lines kind of touch. So on your tile, it might be 2, it might be 3.
All right, so now we can add another crescent moon. I'm going to see if I can sneak one in right here.
Did it?
Yep. Right in those in-between spaces. And then filling in aura lines. This one has an imagination of where it's going to go behind this yet to be tangled spiral. And now one more layer, here we go. And so as they start to bump into each other is when we decide to add some more. Maybe these ones are starting to get smaller. Maybe there's just
very cool.
There. Yeah, it does look really neat. All right, so we've neglected our ladybugs thus far. And I'm going to pick up this very pretty peachy shade Jelly Roll pen.
I love that color.
Yeah, it's got a warm goldeny peach color.
Ochre.
Yes. Here we have all of these ladybug shapes, and you can attack this however it makes sense to you, but I'm going to start from where I started initially. And what's really fun about these jelly rolls is they fill in this space so quickly, but do take your time.
These are 10s, which means they're a nice bold tip. The ink flows happily and beautifully.
I don't want to completely cover that brown ink. I do want to fill in the space.
Nice complementary colors, too.
And you really just need that very light touch. And I think once you get this first string layer down that we did, you'll start to really see the spiral again, because it can get lost because when you work so close with something. So I'm going to continue my way around the spiral, filling in all the crescent moons that we did. We're going to actually just maybe leave this for a little bit. There's a lot of ink to dry.
But the next one, I'm actually going to do this right here so that I have a little space to myself.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go right in order, I think.
So you could pick a spiral, any spiral, but
Pick a spiral.
but probably not one right next to it.
Yeah. And I'm going to start where she did with Tripoli, which is a grouping of triangles. And you can follow along with me and we can kind of fit our Tripoli and see what happens. So I'm going to start at the end here and use the sort of the given string lines to do my first triangle, like so.
With the brown pen.
With the brown pen, thank you. I'm always like just jumping right into things. And then with a little bit of space, I'm going to, not much at all, I'm going to create another triangle here. Different than crescent moon. I don't want to leave that much space, just kind of a hair, a little bit of space.
So this is a little bit of a different approach to Tripoli.
Yep. And this will all come together later, you'll see. But I'm kind of, they look like almost like dinosaur.
Let's say jack-o'-lantern teeth.
Yeah.
So you're really wanting to maximize that curve of the string, emphasizing that edge.
And as Martha did, mine are kind of gradually getting smaller as I get towards this curve.
I actually love strings now because they just like, they trigger my creativity faster. All of a sudden I'm like, find myself working around some sort of cool limitations. Obviously, we started our Tripoli much different than we normally do, but now we're going to kind of go back in and play around with Tripoli as it is with sort of these shark teeth, shall we call them. And what I'm going to do is play around with how I can fit a triangular space into here. And I want you to just focus for a minute. And with this first line, we're going to sort of establish sort of that spacing. So I'm talking about the spacing in between. So I'm fitting a triangular shape into here by kind of that consistency. So basically what you're doing is auraing this line, and then connecting them to create a triangle. So aura, and then connect. Aura, connect. Aura, connect. These are getting a little smaller. Okay. So we're gonna keep playing around with Tripoli here. What we'll do is we'll create an aura here that echoes this triangle, and then create there. And then I think what we'll do is slowly try to figure out how to fill these spaces. So aura, and connect. So on this one, we're gonna aura. This one will go into the center. And so now I have a space here. Like always thinking about that auraing line first. And then the third line can potentially either be just connecting those two lines or actually filling the space itself. So there's different options as this gets closer together. Do I want to make one big triangle here, or do I want to make its own? I'm playing around with different ideas. There's no right or wrong way to do this. So maybe on this one, start to play around how focus on the aura. And then this area in here where the spiral gets kind of pieced together is, I think, supposed to get a little kind of messy and confusing. So don't worry about that.
Well, you just make a decision on how you're going to do it and it'll look great. See,
so
looks great.
Yeah. So find a line, aura. I'm going to be putting a filler inside this Tripoli, and I'm going to start with my biggest one so you can see what we're doing. Arc, and then orb in the middle.
I love how you smush that right in there.
Arc, orb in the middle.
It's neat when you put in those arcs, you're not designing how big that orb is, but the orb is designing itself when it gets there. So it's like you don't have to think about how big of an orb you want to make. And the fact that they're all different sizes is part of the pattern.
So with these ones, some that are really tiny, I'm not obviously I'm not getting room for the orb. It's just kind of, again, a gesture.
So I think we're pretty good here. I'm going to add one last detail to my Tripoli. I'm going to revisit these orbs, and I'm just going to put a little bit of gel pen in there. Just kind of can find its way into that orb pretty good. So you can just kind of move it around quick. If it doesn't hit every inch of the orb, that's okay. Like I said, with these smaller ones, it's really just a dot. But it does help kind of helps your brain see that there's just a little orb in there. So I'm gonna pick up my black 01 just for a minute, and if you wanna wait till your gel pens dry a little bit, you can do that. I'm gonna work around them. But I think it would be cool to sort of just go into yeah, it's such a pop, yeah.
Yeah,
so
it's really good.
I probably could have done this before the gel pen, but that's okay. So cool. So I'm just taking my time and just working on those little interstices. Some of them it's just a little tiny bit. So that's why this 01 is kind of nice.
The black is so complementary to the brown. It almost looks like it's dark brown.
Right? And if there isn't room for the black, then don't force it. Just kind of play around with, I think the fact that it's not everywhere gives it more depth and dimension.
Of course, anytime you add something dark, it brings the light elements to the surface a little bit. So it's fun how they play together like that.
I don't think I need to put any more in there. It's kind of done. So that actually, again, looks pretty cool already. And we're going to continue on with this rhythm of just putting down our ink, and then we'll go back in with some shading once we get all our spirals filled.
Looks so good.
So I love how this is starting to take shape. I'm starting to really be able to envision this masterpiece as it unfolds. I've waited for my gel ink to dry over here, and I am going to pick up my brown pen again, the brown 05, and I'm going to work in the space in between here because I'm kind of excited to see how these spirals nestle up against one another. All right, so we are going to work with an interpretation of a tangle called perk. And to do this, I want to divide my spiral into sections, sort of radiating rays, if you will. And what I'd like to do is have them all appear to be radiating away from this center beginning space here. Because, as Molly was saying, things sometimes get a little, I don't know, confusing right in the center there. I'm going to start a little ways out and start by drawing just 2 lines, but because they might connect down here, but 2 odd lines. And I'm going to work backwards here towards the center and create some spaces to work in. 2 lines. And as we get closer to the center, they might get a little closer to each other. All right, so now I'm going to go back out to where I started. And I want these lines, these radiating lines, to sort of appear like they're coming from that center space. So as I turn the tile, the lines are coming from the center. And now as I'm going around, these spaces now might be a little further apart. These rays will now radiate. I wonder if that's where that comes from. And get a little bit wider each time. This last one hiding behind here. All right, so now we have these spaces that we can draw our shapes in. And Perk uses kind of an orb shape that we're going to conform into these spaces that we've created. So from the bottom, we start with an orb and then smush one right next to it. All the way to the edge. And we're going to put these orb shapes nestled once against one another inside each one of these spaces. Sort of really touching those edges.
Coming together already.
And we're going to go around this whole spiral like this, and then we're going to go back in and probably add some more ink. This one's got to be quite sneaky in here.
They're sneaky orbs?
They're sneaking in, yeah. Again, that suggestion where these spaces are hiding behind, you have to just sort of let the eye think that that's what's going on there. All right, so we've got some good stuff going on here. I'm going to go back in where there are these spaces left behind, these interstices, I guess, and ink in all of those little areas. I actually might just ink in that whole space.
Yeah, either way, you could
Adding
leave them.
some, yeah, you can ink in your lines or you can choose.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, just taking the whole.
Yeah, I've decided to.
It does make contrast. That's nice.
Yeah. And the brown, depending on how much ink you cover, does get very dark. Nice deep dark color.
Yeah, and I think looking at the other tangles we have so far, that's a nice contrast.
Yeah, so you're welcome to leave those ray lines that we did, the first lines we did. You can leave them open or fill them in with ink. And here we, as Molly was saying, sometimes you can go a little bit of outside the space that we have. Just gives a little bit of that illusion of going over the edge of a rounded space.
And I think there's like this sense when you have a practice or a tangling, there's always going to be that sense with anything, like say your practice is yoga or your practice is tangling or it's fishing or whatever it is. There is a very normal and healthy feeling sometimes of rushing to get to the next phase or rushing to get to the end. And then you get to a point where you become comfortable in the present and you don't worry about rushing to get to the end. And it doesn't mean that you're not in an okay place when you have those sensations. It's completely normal. But to allow yourself that space and trust your process and trust the experience, to not get caught up in what's next and not get caught up in sort of hurriedly going through something, I think is part of your journey and part of your time you spend with something when you finally get to that point where you're just wallowing in the inking in and wallowing in that time. And once you find that flow and you find that kind of rhythm, before you know it, that back and forth and up and down and around and careful curation, and then you get to the end.
I love how going through those processes, whether it's inking in like we're doing now, it's kind of what speaks to you or guides you to what's supposed to happen next. You know, you don't have to really worry about it, but you enjoy this part. And then what's revealed is sort of, that's your guide.
It's like processing time, right? I think that's what it is you're like, okay, I can get lost in this for a little bit.
So I'm just sort of imagining how these two tangles are now going to talk to each other here, these side-by-side situations. That's why I chose this space, because I wanted to see how everything got together.
I see.
Again, I'm kind of making this up as I go.
You are?
Well, I wasn't really sure how this was going to fit together.
I'm just
and yours
teasing
might
you.
fit together a little bit differently.
They do look great. All these tiles we're doing are filled with tangling hours, and I feel like with each project pack we get a little deeper and we add a little more time. And we'll say this over and over again, it's not a race. There's no trophies at the finish line. This is for you. You're going to have a beautiful piece of artwork that you can appreciate at the end, but whenever you get there is great. So if you can spend 15 minutes tangling today, great. If you can spend 3 hours tangling today, great. Whatever you have is good, and just appreciate that bit, and that because it's yours, it's your time.
Well, I kind of love how that looks.
It does. That's nice contrast, and that kind of balancing out the other two. I like it.
So I'm going to cap my brown pen now, and we're going to mix it up a little bit. And I mean, if you really love these open spaces, I think you're very welcome to leave them. But I am going to pick up this blue-green pen here and fill in the orbs with this lovely gel ink. And like we did with the crescent moon, I'm going to fill in the space, but I like the idea of the brown staying visible, so I don't really want to go over the edge.
Plus that like little hairline of white is so nice.
So you can see that I'm leaving actually a little bit of area of white as best I can. And it kind of creates that little bit of tension between the colors. Turning the tile, enjoying watching that gel ink slowly dry from super shiny, glossy color to a little bit more subdued and fully absorbed into this beautiful paper. Working my way around, I'm already seeing some of these orbs are dry, and you see a slight difference in color, but it's mostly kind of the finish that's different. Kind of softens a little bit instead of glossy and shiny. I really love the brown and the greenish blue together. It's really pretty. One last little space there. So fun. All right, well, we've got a couple more of these to fill in, and we'll let this dry for a minute, and we'll be right back.
Thank you, Martha. We're moving right along. As usual, it's like I can see this underlayer of tangles, and I'm like already eager for the potential shading to happen. I'm going to start by putting a series of orbs all along this line, kind of spaced out, but sort of like we had before. They kind of gradually get a little tiny bit closer together. So I'm going to start with an orb right on our line here, and then I'm going to dance around.
You're kind of going along the inside of that string.
Yeah. And right now they're kind of equally spaced about the same size, not, and sort of like how we have been playing around, that once we get closer to the spiral, they get a little bit smaller. And a little bit closer together. Something like that. Now we're going to use our cadent stroke here. And when I'm doing cadent, I like to play around with an S stroke, which means or an S curve, which means the stroke is going to wrap around this orb, come down, and then wrap around the orb below it. So I always say the letter S in my mind, so I make sure I'm going the right direction. Wrap around and hook. Letter S. Wrap around, hook. Letter S. Hook. Turning your tile a little bit as you work. Taking your time. All right. So now we have a nice little chain here. And now we're going to use a sort of a similar stroke to what Martha did with her perk, but we're gonna play with it kind of with the cadent here of how we kind of divide it up in these more radiating strokes. So just as Martha did, I'm gonna start kind of right here and then work inward and outward separately. So the stroke goes to this point to start off with. And it wraps around the orb and then lands. So just the inside of this, and it is important to kind of play with that wrapping around the orb, and that makes the line not exactly straight. You get a little bit of, I don't know, interest. Wrap around the orb, go right into the center there. And as we've been talking about, this middle part, a little bit tight. So even that is just so cool.
Really, really pretty.
And then I'm going to go back to the other side. So this is a little trick when you're working with spirals to sort of start in the middle, because it's hard to know how to start here because it's all fuzzy. And then over here it's big. So if you start in the middle, you can kind of get your bearings. So when it starts to curve over here, you gradually stop meeting that point. And you're just giving it a little bit of space here. It's still kind of tapered. It's almost like you're still kind of pulling it towards the center here, but it's gradually moving about. And it's like that. So again, I think I'm going to start in the middle here with my next step. So we have this S stroke here, and I'm just going to create a series of stripes. And it's, I mean, they're more or less straight, but I feel like if you think about
the swoopingness of this.
Do you say swooping?
I said swooping.
Oh, I like the swooping.
Then you get a little bit of a different sort of movement. It's swooping, Martha. And they don't have to match up because they're creates a little more movement that way. Again, just keeping it at the most comfortable place for your hand. Turning your tile as you work. All right, so that is actually pretty cool. We have a rough idea of what's happening. It's sort of pre-shading is going on. I'm going to add just a little bit of rounding right here. Just kind of inking in these little spaces there just to make sure these orbs don't roll away. Maybe just a little bit in here, probably doesn't need too much. Oh, that actually makes it pop a lot. Little bits of rounding makes such a difference.
Beautiful.
Just add a little bit of color to these orbs. Alrighty. And then I think we're just gonna leave that until I get to the pencil part. I think what we'll do is fill in this last little spiral.
For consistency here, I'm going to start with the brown 05 pen. And we are going to put a tangle in here called Zentangle. And what we need to do in order to set ourselves up is to set up some radiating rays, very similar to how we did this perk over here. I am going to start with this reference point here, this center of this string line, and just with a single line, draw a line out to the perimeter, and then turn my tile another, and then as I get a little bit more around the perimeter, my spaces are going to open up a bit. Turn a little bit wider space, and then this one comes out behind. And let's go back to the middle here and work our way into the center of the spiral. And let's work on this one right here, just because it's a nice complete shape and we want to kind of figure out what we're doing here. So I'm going to start out by dividing this space in half as best I can. And then Zentangle is a series of stripes that are on kind of angles to each other. So what we're going to do to set this up is we're going to draw a V shape like this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw parallel stripes to this initial shape that I just drew. You can watch me first if you want.
Zentangle is very simple and actually very complex at the same time.
Yeah, so you could draw several V's down the shape if that's what feels right to you, but for me, I like kind of working in the same line likeness. So I'm going to now draw parallel lines to this.
It is all about the parallel line. That's the trick.
And I found that if I drew V's over and over again, I kind of lost some of that. So that's how I set it up. So that's my initial V shape. And now I'll draw all of my parallel lines. And then I'll do all of these parallel lines. These little tiny ones at the top here. And my jonquil spaces are going to get smaller as we divide these smaller spaces in half. Sometimes when you get to these small inner spaces, you just have to kind of get creative. And in the end, it'll all make sense. Okay, so we have 2 black pens in our kit, and everybody's free to work with whatever they're comfortable with. I am actually going to pick up the 08, which is the larger of the 2, because I'm going to be filling in a lot of ink work. I feel like this kind of helps it along a little bit, but certainly whatever you're more comfortable with, and I may even switch pens as I get into this little nitty-gritty area over here. So with jonquil, it's essentially like a checkerboard where we're wanting to fill in every other space. So you'll want to come up with your own rhythm, and I'm going to start in this. All right, so we're filling in every other square, but you should stay focused because sometimes things get tricky.
And you know what? If you fill in the wrong one, then that happens too.
So you're going to see that a little bit of that brown in the background. It just kind of adds some dimension. I'm going to fill in every other one on this side and then every other one on that side, so that I can kind of focus on what I'm doing. That makes the most sense to me. I like to sort of outline the space that I'm filling in and then fill in. Of course, you can go back later with an 01 and clean it up if you will.
Looks pretty good. It is like a really subtle detail, but there's something about drawing the structure in brown and then going back in with the black that's like interesting to me.
This little bit at the top, and then all of these stripes will be filled in every other one. Jonquil usually commands quite a presence on a tile. And if you accidentally fill in the wrong space, well, there you go. It's just ink and just paper. And there's always a way to figure out how to make it work. When I have an opportunity for a lot of inking in like this, I kind of play around with different ways of filling in the spaces, see which way I like the best, which way works the best. So we're getting pretty close here to the inside, and as I was saying, you might have to get a little creative, and sometimes when the stripes of your jonquil get smaller, maybe there's fewer of them, and so perhaps your stripes aren't opposite every time. So if you have to fill in 2 spaces with the same black ink, then it's actually okay. And at any point, if you want to switch to the 01 pen, which I think I may do now, I'm going to just give this a little outline here first. I'm going to pick up the 01 pen just to finish it off. does make a big difference.
Oh, nice.
And you kind of just do your best down here, and once we start shading and adding some other embellishments.
That's what I say, do your best and let shading do the rest.
Oh, yes, I like that one. You can, once you have this 01 in your hand, can really kind of clean up some of your other lines if you want to, or if it seems to be asking for it.
Redefine the line.
Also on the very edges here where you do have black ink, adding that little bit of curve of ink is just going to give it that bit of a rounded edge, a bit of a kind of tricks your eye. All right, so you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
What if this is just an option,
A lot of layers here.
grab this nice juicy peachy jelly roll and fill in all of the spaces that are left behind here.
And I think it's important to note in any of these project packs, we are delivering a smorgasbord of options, and any of them can be rejected by you.
Yeah,
So
you could just be like, I am all done. Thank you very much. I'm happy with mine. But if you've got a little more in you, let's see what we can do and add this other color here. And now we have the luxury of only open spaces here. So you get to fill up any open space left. See, now this isn't so bad. It fills in quite quickly. And I think that it will be very complementary to kind of the next step of things that we're going to do. We're going to put away our pens in a minute and pick up some beautiful pastel pencils and some graphite and start to really add dimension to this already beautiful tile. Really, it's actually quite beautiful. So we're going to let this dry here for just a bit, and then come back in and pull everything together. It's looking so good.
the moment you've all been waiting for. Or actually,
That's just what you've been waiting for.
Well, it looks like it's waiting for something is what it looks like. A group of people waiting for something is what it looks like right here. It's like Mr. Jonkel and Triple E and
I don't know, it kind of looks like a cake waiting for frosting.
a little bit, maybe. Well, I'm ready. I'm going to start with Triple E. You're going to want to make sure that everything's dry. So just kind of rub your hand over it gently, make sure everything's dry. Mine's been sitting here for quite a while, so I think we're pretty good. I am going to start by trying to locate that original spiral, if you remember it a little bit. And I'm just going to start by putting a pretty dark graphite line sort of on the outside of where that I imagine that spiral was. So I can kind of tell because my triangles kind of hugged that spiral line. So I'm going to put, and I'm using the edge of my pencil, and I'm going to kind of wrap it around here. You can kind of guess. And then I'm going to put a little bit here. Just for starters. And then I'm going to have my tortillons kind of at the ready. And I just wanted to do that one first. because I feel like that just sort of establishes my spiral again. It's the beginning of my layering here. Now I am going to play a little bit with the yellow ochre pencil, which is like my favorite new pencil I've been playing around with. And I'm going to, again, using the side of it, I'm gonna put a little bit right over everything, just up by the edge here. Just playing around with some tones, watching how the ochre goes over. It's like this fun palette we've been playing with this whole project pack. Using my tortillon that's for these pastel pencils just kind of melt into the paper, which is nice. And just inviting the color into the paper. A little bit more intense inside the spiral. A little darker there. And then maybe a little bit over there. Kind of get a feel for what works for you. And now I think I'm gonna go just along the edge now, just a little bit. Not gonna go all the way into the spiral. I'm gonna kind of just go around the edges here. And I'm not so worried about the edges here because I do usually go back over with my pens at the end to kind of clean things up. So you can always go back in and add more. All right, so I already have a pretty cool natural highlight here that I'm enjoying a lot. And then lastly, I'm just gonna take this white pencil and just do a little bit of a highlight in the middle here. Just using the side of the pencil. And usually the pencil itself kind of takes care of the blending. If you've done a lot of pastel underneath it, the white's not going to show up as much, but try to get a little bit over there. So that's one done. Very cool. Can just keep going and going. I'm going to skip over here to my cadent, and I'm going to play around with a slightly different technique here. I'm just going to start with this yellow pencil, and I'm just gonna play around with just starting with one of these little columns here, and I'm gonna put some yellow at the top and the bottom. Just a little bit at the top and a little bit at the bottom. Then I'm gonna skip over one, and I'm gonna do the same thing. Little yellow at the top, little at the bottom. These pastel pencils get moved around pretty easily with a tortillon, so a lot of times you can play around with just putting the pencil itself in a select places and then moving it around and getting some sort of variation. Oh, I almost did the same one again. That's okay. I'm gonna just skip over because you'll see in a minute. And like I said, if you make a little oopsie like that, just keep going. It usually ends up fading into the background. Take my tortillon and kind of brush over all of the ochre. And I'm naturally leaving the middle as like a kind of natural highlight. So by putting the ochre just in two places, it's like they can almost meet each other. I'm gonna switch to this beautiful brownish pen and sort of do the same thing. Again, just putting a little bit on either end so you can get sort of
idea of the color, but it doesn't have to be, you don't have to color in the whole thing. This brown is a different color, darker color, so I use even less than I did with the yellow because it kind of, you don't even need as much. So now if you have a tortillon for the brown, I realize that they do get kind of all blend together after a while, but you can start them off.
Good intentions.
Right? As you can see, my little oopsie faded away. I just kept going. Oh, look at that beautiful natural highlight. That's so pretty. I'm going to pick up my graphite pencil now, and I'm going to add a little shadow here along the outside of where the spiral sort of overlaps, much like we did with the Tripoli. Blend that. Blend it a little bit, little shading along the edge here. Just taking your time, doing a little bit, blending a little bit. I'm gonna put some shading right over these radiating lines. A little bit different.
Oh, that makes a huge difference.
Yep. There's always like so many different ways to play with dimension and shading. Just kind of using the side of the pencil here. Going right over that line. Oh my goodness. Love it, love it, love it. And then last but not least, I'm gonna go back and just do another highlight in each one of these columns with the white pencil. It's like nobody would know how you began, but just stroke by stroke, taking your time, turning your tile, going back in and adding more here and there.
Incredible.
Right?
Okay, so looking at this crescent moon here, I think I'm going to do things a little different than Molly did them.
Really?
But it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just different. I'm going to start out with this yellow ochre pencil first. I'm going to try to stay away from this middle section here. I want to keep that with no pencil on it. So just going to go around the edges. Kind of working on the side of the pencil, really getting it in there. Picking this up. And working it into space here. Already quite a bit of contrast going on here. So we've got a tonal experience happening here. It's kind of cool. And I kind of just went around that initial little curve. You can kind of see it there. So now that we've got this yellow ochre going on, I'm going to actually follow pretty much just the same path with the graphite around that spiral and around the edge, but just staying on the edge.
Yeah, and with the spiral, you're kind of trying to locate where that line was and go, you know, to create that overlapping look. It's
Yeah, similar to what we did over here. I'm putting a heavy-ish line down on that. Again, it's a pretty heavy line here, and we're going to smooth that out in a moment. And I'm kind of going in one direction here. I'm trying to moving it into where I was smoothing the ochre pencil. You want to kind of get it in there, but you can be gentle with the paper. Kind of just take care of it a little here. Maybe adding some here where the two spirals meet. And then kind of
emphasizing these white spaces that are left behind here. Really helping them stand out with this white.
Very cool, Martha. So that's a little bit of an interesting technique because she's kind of going back into some of the pattern.
Yeah, I'm really kind of trying to get it into that sort of naked paper there, the untouched paper.
Very cool.
So in these sections here with my graphite pencil, I am going to add graphite on either side of each one of these sort of columns that the perk creates.
And I know we said this before, but with the jelly roll, you really want to have that, like Martha has her pencil on the side, which is so helpful because you don't want to, otherwise you kind of make marks in the surface of the jelly roll.
Yeah, and there's so much, it's a softer experience when you have the side edge of that graphite.
It's where the short pencil comes in handy.
So you'll see when you leave these little spaces of white, you know, which we did on purpose with the jelly roll, that takes the graphite a little bit differently than the jelly. So you have these different reactions, different dimensions that come out. So
nice.
Smoothing that out a little bit.
Love that.
I'm going to show you a whole one, and then you can go along however you please. And with the white, again, working on the side, kind of creating just a highlighted area in the middle so that center kind of pops out a little bit. Go back and forth. You can see that with any bits of extra graphite, I'm kind of going over the end as well. As you get to the center, depending on what your spaces look like, you may just want to add some heavier graphite there. We'll kind of have a look at it in a minute after we get the white on and see.
Nice.
So working with that space that didn't have any graphite on it and just adding some of our white.
That's awesome.
You can go back and darken in that sort of initial curve here.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see if that works for you. So we have this one lonely spot left here, this jonquil curve. So here's our first space here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add graphite all along the edge of this column here where they're all going in this direction. So just a good bit of graphite down this edge, and I will kind of soften that a little bit so you can see. Now I'm going to skip this next one, and I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Again, all of the stripes are going in this direction.
Nice. A bunch of different ways to shade jonquil. You can kind of look at them as like sort of mountains and valleys and try to figure out what kind of illusion you want to create with the shading. And this is one way.
All right, so back where we started, I am now going to pick up the white charcoal pencil and do the same thing in the columns that we ignored, but with white. So right along that.
Ooh, very cool detail.
And of course with the white kind of shows up on both of the colors underneath. And I will use a tortillon with this. Just gonna smooth it in. Yeah, it's looking cool. maybe just emphasize a little bit more on these. I've got these cool kind of back and forth things going on, but I'm going to go back to this original, again, what we've kind of been doing that on each one of these, kind of reminding the eye of that initial curve in the middle here. I really want to emphasize that spiraling inward, and then maybe carrying that graphite that's on my tortillon already a little bit around the edges here.
Nice.
All right, should we go back and just kind of tighten everything up?
I think so.
All right.
Martha, we are so close. The shading looks beautiful. I'm excited about all of it. Something we often do at the end of our tiles is like sort of something you might not think makes a difference, but I think it makes a lot of difference, especially if you're working with really heavy shading, which we have obviously in this
Lots
tile.
of shading here.
And it's just kind of like to pull it all together, tighten it up, and kind of make the shading kind of pop. So I'm going to take my black Micron 01, and I'm going to actually go into some different spaces and kind of redefine the edges. So one thing I'm going to first do is I'm going to go on the inside, and I'm going to kind of just...
Oh, already that makes a difference.
Just work the inside here.
Definitely cleans up those edges.
Right? A little trickier on this one.
It looks so fun though.
Right? And I am going to put in just a tiny bit of rounding, which is where you kind of like, almost like you're putting a little mortar or glue in there.
You don't really need very much. It's this just suggestion of where these lines come together.
Right? All right. Now I'm going to go along the outside of my tile and do similar. Just taking my time. I just get a position my tile feels comfortable, and then I like to pull the pen toward me until it gets uncomfortable, and then I gently move the tile and then kind of start over a little bit of the line I've already drawn to give it a smooth transition. Just turning my tile as I go. Reworking a line if it needs to be reworked. It's just like, this is like cleanup time, you know? If there's any these little nooks, you can kind of do a little rounding here and there. All right, and I do think I'm gonna also do it on the edges of the spirals. So just kind of connecting rediscovering that little bit. And I don't think I'm going to go all the way in with the spiral, but I kind of just invite it in like that a little. But it's up to you, however you want to do it. Okay, I think that's all of them. Wow, that is really popping off the page.
It's amazing.
Well, this has been fun. I think that we're pretty much done, and I think the only thing left is to sit back, enjoy our work, maybe put a little
Add our chops.
Add our chops on here.
Great job, Miss Molly.
I love it. Thanks for tangling along with us. And I give you a lot of credit for hanging in there no matter how long it took you. This is a beautiful tile, and you deserve to show it to somebody else.
Have a great
Take care.
day.
See you soon.